and they champion the Dalai Lama as a bastion of freedom. My gosh, when China hosted the Olympics in 2008, 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, they couldn't even march the Olympic flame through North American cities. All the protests against the Chinese for a sporting event because of their persecution of the Dalai Lama. Because the West sees the Dalai Lama as someone who's essential to their identity and their character. We need this man to help us escape this corrosive materialism, the Xboxes and the cell phones and all this garbage and junk that's ruining our children. We need him to give us answers, and we're going to fight for him. When it comes to Israel, they don't see Israel as serving any purpose other than the Jewish state. So if you're an evangelical Christian and you believe in what the Bible says, that through Israel you will be blessed, and you support and you defend Israel because it's part of your theological heritage. But if you're the average Joe on the street and Israel is about as meaningful to you as Malaysia, then why should you offer your support? The American Jewish community, many feel that President Obama is not anti-Israel, to be fair, but may not have any special feelings for Israel. But then why should he? Why should the United States favor Israel over anyone else? Based on what? We start searching for answers. Common history, common values. President Obama spoke in Cairo. He said the reason is primarily that the Jews suffered 6 million dead at the end of the Holocaust, and that explains one of the reasons that they deserve a state. But by that criteria, the Armenians deserve a state. They suffered genocide in the First World War. The Kurds deserve a state. They suffered near genocide under Saddam Hussein. The point is, so long as the Jews have nothing to offer the world, so long as our existence does not enlighten other people, then how do we portray ourselves as a blessing to others? It goes further. Because I was asked tonight to speak about young Jewish detachment from the Jewish state, which is being widely chronicled in newspapers throughout the country. Peter Beinart's famous piece about a year and a half ago where he said that young Jews, especially on university campuses, are completely alienated from Israel. They buy the lie that Israel is an expansionist, territorial, oppressive regime that denies the human rights of Palestinians. And they feel very alienated from Israel. There are 6 million American Jews. How many already are members of AIPAC? Or support Amit? Or support any of the organizations that operate in Israel? What percentage are we talking about of American Jewry? 8%? 10%? With 90% being unaffiliated? All of this comes down to our inability to demonstrate that Judaism has light to offer the world. That the Jewish people have any wisdom, have any tradition, have any values by which to make the world a better place. In other words, Judaism has become very self-serving. It's all about retaining an identity. What do we tell our kids? You have to marry Jewish. Why? Because if you don't marry Jewish, then the Jewish people are going to disappear. That's a circular argument. If you don't marry Jewish, there won't be any Jews. But you haven't given a single reason as to why there should be Jews. And here I have to speak about something painful. I've spent the past 24 hours being absolutely savaged, pummeled, attacked mercilessly on a few, let's call them right-wing Jewish websites, but with hundreds of people commenting, demanding that I be kicked out of Judaism, ostracized. No, it's really bad. It's unbelievable. And there's a debate raging on these websites right now with thousands of comments, and it's like just growing. It all has to do with a book that isn't even published yet. It's being published the 1st of February. I do have some copies tonight. And this is what it's called. It's called Kosher Jesus. This is a galley copy of the book. And I have all these attacks. Rabbi Shmuley is saying that Jews should embrace Jesus. Rabbi Shmuley is opening the door for Jews for Jesus. Rabbi Shmuley has gone over to the other side. One guy wrote, Rabbi Shmuley has lost his marbles. I don't want my siblings to comment on that. Do you know why I wrote this book? There are many reasons, but the main reason? understand that 2,000 years ago, the person who ends up being one of the most influential in history, it's not even Jesus. It's a man named Paul. We don't know much about Paul. He claims he was born a Jew. He probably wasn't. He's probably a convert to Judaism. He said he was a student of Rabban Gamliel. To be a student of Gamliel, you had to be one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim, one of the greatest Jewish scholars of the ancient world. He probably wasn't that either, because he essentially could not read and write Hebrew. We know he couldn't read and write Hebrew because whenever he quotes the Torah in his letters, he quotes it from the Greek Septuagint. Now, if he knew Hebrew, he'd be quoting it in the original. But why does this all matter? Because Paul does something extraordinary. He looks at the Jewish religion and he says to himself, oh my God, there is such beauty in this. There is such depth. I bet I could take these ideas and spread them throughout the world. Now, he later becomes an enemy of the Jews. He accuses us of having killed Jesus and we're cursed. And he takes Judaism and he gives it a bit of a pagan overlay and he sells it to the rest of the world. And it becomes the most successful idea in world history. Christianity is by far the world's most successful idea. There are 1.1 billion Catholics and there are another 700 million Protestants. Almost 1 out of 2 people on earth is a Christian. All based on Jewish ideas. Think about it. We're supposed to be good businessmen. The Jews are great businessmen. Have you ever heard of a great businessman, all of whose intellectual property is taken without any attribution, without any kind of copyright? We gave the world God. Today his name is Jesus Christ. We gave the world the Sabbath. Today it's called Sunday. We gave the world the 10 Commandments. Today it's called morality. We gave the world the first chapter of Genesis, every human being created in God's image. Today it's called democracy. Every idea we have has been taken. Paul was a genius at this, and he calls it by a new name, Christianity, and the net result is that we Jews can't even take pride in our spiritual contribution to the world because it all goes by a different name. And the purpose of this book was to trace it all back to its origin. It all comes from us. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, that every last letter of the Torah has to be kept. He never came to start a new religion. That was Paul. He said, if you don't keep every last letter of the Torah, you will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. The story that has been handed down to Christians is not an accurate story. The story has changed. I'm not going to get into the details of the book, but the story was changed after the Jewish revolt of the year 66. When the Jews, having failed in the Roman revolt, become the most hated group in the entire Roman Empire. But just imagine this. That everything that we stand for has been taken without attribution. And then we wonder why young Jews have no Jewish pride. Pride in what? In fact, I have to tell you, most people believe, so here's the question that all of us ask. Anti-Semitism. What is it? Why is there so much Jew hatred in the world? Today I was speaking to a reporter about this book as we're just starting to unroll it and do media interviews. And the woman says to me, how do you explain the phenomenon of anti-Semitism in countries where there are no Jews? Did everyone see the story last week? That a Fox News website in Latin America did a multiple choice. Who killed Jesus? And one of the choices is the Jews. This just doesn't go away. The woman said, that's amazing, Latin America. I said, Latin America? I said, you don't have to go to Latin America for that. 5 years ago, it was the biggest movie in this country. Mel Gibson, one of the most celebrated actors of our time, does a movie, and he essentially portrays the Jews as handing Jesus over to the Romans, and Pontius Pilate literally washes his hands. Takes out water, washes it, which is where the expression comes from. And he says, I will not put an innocent man to death. And the Jews are praying for his blood. Mel Gibson made $500 million on this, praying for his blood. And the whole movie's in Aramaic, except for one line, which was so inflammatory that even Mel Gibson didn't translate it. When Pilate says, I will not put him to death, and the Jews demand it, and Pilate says, then he's your responsibility, and the Jews answer, Matthew chapter 28, his blood be upon us and our children. We killed God. We are guilty of deicide. And we bequeath that curse to every single one of our children. So that each one of them is ripe for murder. They have the blood of Jesus on their hands. You don't have to go to Latin America to find that. That was the biggest movie in this country 5 years ago. And then one day I'm sitting with my kids in Ashland, Oregon on an RV trip at the Shakespeare Festival, and the phone rings, and it's a reporter from the AP, and she says, would you like to comment on this arrest of Mel Gibson? He was sitting in the back of a police cruiser, and he said, effing Jews start all the world's wars. And I said, I have no comment, other than to say, I told you so. This is one of the most anti-Semitic movies. This is not based on Scripture, the New Testament. This is his pure invention. Of course he's a Jew hater. That was the biggest movie in this country. So what? Where does anti-Semitism come from? By the way, no one really knows. I don't want to talk about the Talmud's theory of it, which is the most compelling, but I want to give you an academic theory. You know what in places like Oxford, where I served as rabbi, you know what the theory is as to why there's still anti-Semitism in the world? Why does it never go away? Are they ever going to stop hating Israel? Are they ever going to stop misrepresenting Israel? You got to see what's happening in Europe. I was in England 2 weeks ago speaking at the Limud conference, 5 days in Warwick. In Warwick University, there was an Israeli doctoral student, a woman who came from Israel. Many Israeli students go to England for their degrees. And this woman, brilliant student, gets a pass on a PhD doctorate that she worked on for 4 years. And it turns out that her supervisor is one of the most virulent Israel haters, writing paper after paper. Her professor, publishing them, calling Israel a Nazi state. She had appealed to the university, got no justice. It took years. It took years of appeal. It was just in the newspapers 4 or 5 days ago. If you saw them, she finally got the equivalent of an A grade. This happens in Europe every day. Where does it come from? Among educated people at universities. So the prevailing academic theory as to the rise of anti-Semitism, the persistence of anti-Semitism, is what's called the ghost theory. You know what the ghost theory is? Nobody likes a ghost. The Jews are an ancient people. They gave the world great ideas. And now that you gave us those ideas, and they've been embraced by Christians and Muslims, you should have disappeared. Nobody invites the midwife to live with her in the house after she delivers the baby. You help midwife these ideas. Go home! What are you doing living in my house? You Jews are a ghost nation. You have no land. You have no purpose any longer. Having bequeathed these ideas to the world, why are you still here? Find me one Jew who can answer that question. Why are we still here? Why are we here? To perpetuate what? Jewishness? Or perhaps the reason is that it's not true that we gave those ideas to the world. Perhaps the reason is that we still have so much more to give, a unique contribution that can bring healing to this world if only we ourselves would discover it. There are treasures in our tradition that even we are unaware of, which were we to discover them and disseminate them, it would transform Israel's image among the nations of the world. It would transform how the Jews are perceived by the nations of the world. It would reinvigorate Jewish youth, and it would reestablish Jewish identity. I'm just going to give you 2 examples tonight. There isn't time for more. Of values that are unique to our tradition and our nation, that would bring such incredible healing to America, that right now Christianity is not capable of, and neither is Islam. And I'm not saying that our religion is better. It's not better. You need everybody's contribution. I'm saying that we haven't made ours. Let's begin with one example. What is the biggest problem in America today? Is it a bad economy? The economy is not great. It's getting a little bit better. Unemployment is down slightly. But it's not as bad as the Great Recession. Is it that America's at war? Well, we wish we could bring our brave men and women home from places like Afghanistan. We can't yet. There's a lot of bad people out there that want to hurt us. But that's not the worst thing. There are 2 million Americans in uniform. At the height of World War II, there were 20 million. Is it that we don't have new sources of fuel? Well, and energy, we have to find them. But the lights are still on. What's the biggest problem in America today? Well, by far, the biggest problem in the United States is unhappiness, depression. We are the single most depressed nation on earth, officially, statistically. Statistically, 1 out of 3 American women is on an antidepressant, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil. Statistically, about 40% of men have reported moods of deep and dark depression at some point in their life. Our kids are on Ritalin, or we give them a steady diet of TV and violent video games just to distract them and somehow babysit them and raise them. But most of what we do is evade reality. Why do you think? Can anyone here name a single famous actor in American history prior to the modern era besides John Wilkes Booth? Can you name any famous actors, entertainers, comedians from ancient Greece? Can you name a famous actor from ancient Rome? Of course not. Entertainers were never central to any culture, except in modern America and the modern West, where they totally dominate the landscape. Why are entertainers the biggest thing out there?
To make you laugh.
Because they help you forget.
Right, escapism.
And it's never been this pervasive. It's never been this vital. It's never been this central. Lady Gaga is the most famous American maybe in the world, with the sole exception of the President of the United States. Before it was Britney Spears, Michael Jackson, I could go on. Try to name all 9 Supreme Court justices. For goodness sake, tell me who your congresswoman is. But everybody knows that Russell Brand and Katy Perry are divorced. Even I know that. Well, I'm glad you all came tonight, so you learned something. What doesn't make sense is how the richest country in the world has the highest rates of unhappiness. That just does not square. In fact, I want to give you an idea of how rich America is, thank God, amidst its economic problems. The second highest standard of living on planet Earth is in Germany. It is 20% below, per capita, the United States. China, the average Chinese earns 10% of American per capita income. We have troops in 122 nations, more than Rome at the height of its glory could even dream of, and yet we're so miserable, unhappy, and depressed. I'll tell you why. It has to do with the abandonment of Jewish values. You see, there were values that Christianity did not adopt. There were things that Paul did not get right. Paul insisted on the deity of Jesus. For him, Jesus was perfect. He completely abandoned the Jewish tradition of struggle. The main difference between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament is that in our Torah, in the book of Genesis, which we just completed this past Shabbos, there isn't a single perfect person. Abraham messes up with raising Yishmael. And Yitzchak messes up with Esau. And Yaakov favors Yosef. And Yosef's brothers try to kill him, and they sell him into slavery. I could go on. The story of Yehuda and Tamar, let alone the fall of Adam and Eve. Or Noah's self-centeredness and allowing the whole world to perish while he and his family are saved. Jesus, of course, has none of these flaws. He is God on earth and he is perfect. Do you understand the difference between these two? Whenever you take perfection and you compare yourself to it, you get depressed. Whenever you take women and you stick them on the front of magazine covers with perfect bodies, always in their 20s, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Nordic-looking bombshells, and the average woman, and no one tells you, by the way, that they've been airbrushed into perfection, no matter how many hours they've sat at that gym, then the average woman opens those magazines, compares herself to them, and she feels a little bit imperfect. It's the strangest thing in the whole world. That women feel self-conscious and get unhappy about what should be the most natural process. Aging. I had this woman that comes to me for counseling a few weeks ago, and she won't let her husband touch her. They've been platonic for like a year, and she was abused by her uncle, and that led to a very promiscuous streak in her life, and she was telling me from the age of 15 that she's slept with tens and tens of men, and she's telling me the details and the names, and her husband's sitting there like ashen-faced, and as she's saying all this, I said to her, how old are you? She looks at me and says, how dare you? The chutzpah. How dare you? Could you imagine that women are ashamed to simply share the amount of years they have lived and breathed and loved on this earth as if it's something sinful? As if they've done something shameful? Because we all judge ourselves by standards of perfection. The same thing is true in how we raise our kids. We punish ourselves when our kids aren't exactly perfect. We start feeling like such failures as parents, or failures as Jews. We're never perfect. When really righteousness is found in he or she who struggles to do the right thing amid a predilection to do otherwise. This is why Abraham was special. This is why Isaac was special. This is why Jacob was special. Not because they were perfect, but because amid their human frailty, they struggled to reach higher. And I would prefer to embrace someone who wrestles and struggles than the boring, monotonous, predictably perfect person any day of the week, which is the principal reason that Barack Obama isn't identifying with the American electorate. He lacks Bill Clinton's flaws. He lacks George Bush's twisted syntax. The main complaint is he only reads from a teleprompter. Screw a speech up once, for goodness sake. Show us that you're human. That's what Mitt Romney is now suffering from. That he comes across as the guy can be in one of those test wind tunnels, and his hair will emerge perfect. As the Talmud says, an olive only produces its oil when it's squeezed, and a grape only produces its wine when it is squeezed. But in America, the standards of perfection are out of control. I read the Steve Jobs biography, which is now the biggest selling biography of all time, by Walter Isaacson. And it's about a man who just almost couldn't put... Why is he the most famous businessman? Because every product was perfect. The iPod, and the iPad, and the iPhone, and the iCloud, and screw something up. And the truth is that he did. But we forget that part of the story, because in America we only trump perfection. I am not a Christian because I reject perfection. And I embrace struggle. And I've struggled my whole life. I'm struggling now with vicious attacks, seeking to undermine my own credibility. And I know that my kids who want to be raised in Chabad find it especially painful because this is their community. But that's life. You stand up for what's right, and sometimes you pay a price. And sometimes you even stand up for what's not right. And you learn from your mistakes. That is life. And there's a beauty to it, of forgiving ourselves for our humanity. That's why God never came clothed in a body. We don't reject the belief in the divinity of Jesus or any man because it would be impossible. If God wants to come down as a man, he could. But God explicitly says, Ki lo yadamu. He is not a man. The Torah says another day God gave the Ten Commandments. You did not see any image. The idea was you saw no perfection on that day. Human beings seek to worship God. And that's why forgiveness, that's why the holiest day of our year is Yom Kippur, a day where we celebrate our flaws and our imperfections, where we come before God with our tail between our legs and we ask Him to forgive us, just as we ask one another. My God, I'm a marriage counselor and I'm getting sick of the damn job because I can't believe how unforgiving husbands and wives are of each other these days. They just won't forgive. We can't keep marriages together. We can't even get young people to marry. They come with a whole list of this perfection they're looking for. And they judge each other so harshly. Go to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where there's 200, there's only 6 million Jews in America, but there's 200 million Jewish singles on the Upper West Side alone. And by the way, isn't this what's killing Judaism in Israel? And in the United States, and in England? With the rise of the religious extremists. I spoke at the Likud conference in England 2 weeks ago. 2,500 young Jews. That's a lot in a country with only 250,000 Jews. 1% of the entire population came. But the Orthodox rabbis wouldn't come because there were Reform rabbis there. And they won't legitimize them. So 2,500 Jews who don't know a thing. My gosh, I'm Chabad to my core. It's something I chose, and it's in my DNA now, and it'll never leave me. But even Lubavitch didn't go to this conference to give out menorahs on Hanukkah. They'll give out menorahs in like the porn districts of 42nd Street in New York, which you should do. If they're Jews, they're give them a menorah. But not at this conference. Because the Beis Din in London has ruled that you can't ever appear alongside Reform Jews. Reform rabbis, I should say, because you might legitimize them. I leave the conference, I take a plane to Israel, where we did a press conference till we decided to launch this book in Yerushalayim at a press event. The day I arrived is the day that girl in Beit Shemesh was spat on. And the whole country was in an uproar. And the next day, just when it was subsiding a little bit, A Haredi man yells at a soldier, a female soldier, who's now been dubbed the Jewish Rosa Parks. She has to move to the back of the bus. She refuses. He calls her a whore. And he gets arrested for sexual harassment, which was an interesting interpretation of the law. The people are now debating, what's wrong with these people? Why are they doing it? Many things are wrong. But it really comes down to this ridiculous belief in perfection. We're going to make our communities absolutely perfect. And any woman who walks in looking just a little bit provocative, she has undermined the perfection of what we're supposed to see. Now let me tell you something. If you go to the Kotel every day, you'll see women, tourists, walking in, especially in the summer months, with tank top t-shirts. It's very hot. And you know what they do? It's with such dignity. They have women at the 4 entrances, and they sit there with shawls, and as you walk in, they say, excuse me, you're entering a holy place. Would you mind please putting this on? Do you think that one person would say, no, forget that. I'm going to shove my cleavage into the faces of every chassid at the wall? That's not what they're doing. They put on a shawl, they behave respectfully, and if that were done in Mea Shearim, we would have the best of both worlds. But we have the perfection police. And perfection will find flaws even in an 8-year-old. It's this worship of perfection. Why do you think we have the Chumrah of the Week Club, where Judaism is becoming more and more extreme, more and more perfect? It is, we're beating the humanity out of our religion. It's losing its heart. And it's becoming a Chil Hashem. When I was a boy in Lubavitch camp, they took us once a year from the heat of Homestead, Florida, to Orlando to Disneyland. And we'd get a whole speech. The non-Jewish kids arrived at Disneyland, they were on Dumbo the Flying Elephant 5 minutes later. But we always got the speech, but that speech made an impact on my life till today. And the speech was, your kids with yarmulkes and your tzitzis out. And people are going to be watching you. And if you cut lines, or if you yell, run around like hooligans, you will make a Chilul Hashem. There was a self-consciousness that was beat into us. That we were ambassadors at the age of 8 or 10 of something that was higher than us. And I'm now 45 years old. And to the extent that some of my actions have reflected positively on my God and on my people, those have been my proudest moments. And to the extent that some of my actions have disgraced either my God or my religion, those have been my lowest moments. What have I been Oh. Yes. Yes, like in Italy with the car rental. You have to understand, what my brother is doing is reinforcing.
What did you say?
My brother is
a little incident with the car rental place in Milan, Italy. We won't get into it.
The incident was that one of the people who were at the counter, I saw that they were not earning minimum wage, so I wanted to give them all my money, and I did, out of my deep humanity. But my brother felt that I was wrong for not giving the shirt off my back as well.
Right.
Knowing how altruistically I normally behave, he was kind of surprised that I held something back. And I agree, Chamash, that was wrong. I love having family at lectures. I can't wait for Amit to invite me back next week as well. By the way, the search for perfection is also why the caliber of our politicians is so low. Because the really talented, effective people who could get this country out of the ditch it's in would never run for public office. Because all the press is going to do is put them through the meat grinder. So they stay out. Instead of expecting, you know what, everyone has something to be that they're ashamed of. Nobody's perfect. And expect the imperfections of your leaders. And let them run as long as they know how to fix the darn economy and get America back to work. And fight the bad guys. That's a great leader. But perfection is ruining the very idea of leadership. And if we Jews would convey this principle to America, it would be so much happier. It would be a far less judgmental place. We wouldn't hear only about abortion and gay marriage as two social values issues that always dominate the political discourse. We would start hearing about real things, how to make marriages better, and how people can be more forgiving and inspire their kids and talk to them. Do you know that once a year I sit my children down before Yom Kippur and I apologize to them for all of my shortcomings that year as a father? And it's the most humiliating hour of my life. But I do it because you have to tell your kids that you understand that you're not perfect, so that they forgive you. I see so much anger of kids towards parents these days. And there's a lot of anger from we, the children of Israel, to our Father in heaven. We look at the Holocaust, we look at the hatred of Israel, we look at Jews still dying, and we wonder why God allows this. And part of the Jewish idea of struggle is Yisrael, he who struggles and wrestles with God. He who questions cosmic whys and wherefores. But again, the perfection police have told us we have no right to even do that. That why was there a Holocaust? Because you Jews deserved it. Because you were imperfect. Why was there a Holocaust? Because you wanted to be more German than the Germans. Why was there a Holocaust? Because you married out. And it might happen again. Because you're still sinful. I've heard this garbage since I was a kid. And it's been taught to my kids at schools where I pay out-of-control tuition to hear these non-Jewish absurd ideas that have no source in Judaism. When God sends Moses, as he will, over the next few parshias to redeem the Jewish people, and God says, and that's the amazing thing about this week's parsha, at the end of Parsha Shemos, God says to Moshe, go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses goes and says it. Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, really? Forget it. Not only am I not going to let them go, but I find you insolent. I'm going to take the people's straw away, and I'm going to increase their burden. Do you know what Moshe does? Do you think he goes to the Jewish people and says, do you know you're being punished because you're sinful? Because you've become more Egyptian than the Egyptians? Because you've assimilated? Because you drive on Shabbos? Because you eat chazer treif? He does no such thing. He goes back to God and he says, this is incredible. Wait till you read it. For those of you who do the chitas, the daily portion, which you should try to study 15 minutes of Torah a day, Moses goes back to God, the last portion of this week's Torah reading, and he says, Lama, listen to these words, Lama hare osa la'am hazeh. Why have you behaved wickedly to this people? Oh my God. He talks to God like that? Why have you behaved wickedly? You mean he wasn't vaporized on the spot? And since you sent me, he continues, things have gotten much worse for the Jews, and you have done nothing to save your people. He points an accusatory finger at the heavens. He establishes the human right to wrestle with God in the face of seeming divine miscarriages of justice. We did not deserve a Holocaust. We are a faithful people. We have kept our religion through thick and thin, through slaughter and gas chambers for 3,300 years. We have never lost it. And we Jews deserve better. Which is why the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to stand and sit when he was in his 80s and pound the table so loud that all of us could hear it. And he would scream, Ad Mosai, how long, God, will the Jews remain in exile? How long will Israeli soldiers die on borders when they simply seek to protect small children? How long will Jews in Arab lands face slaughter, discrimination? How long will Israel be maligned at the United Nations? How many more centuries will this continue? We demand Mashiach now. And until the Rebbe, there was no such demand. You weren't allowed to force the millennium. You couldn't force the apocalypse. But one man changed Jewish theology to reestablish this Mosaic tradition of holding God accountable. Because we are a faithful nation. We're not perfect. But damn if we haven't been loyal. If we, Jews, could convey this to America, instead of the Christian tradition of divine submission, you must bow your head before God And you are always sinful. The essence of Christianity is that you're born in sin. I hope that's not God calling right now. I would actually suggest that those of you who are sitting in the front row, sometimes the lightning's off by about a foot. Christian emphasis on submission. That you're born in sin. And that you need someone else to save you. Or the fact that Islam translates literally as he who submits. To be a Muslim is to be someone who submits. But to be a Jew is someone who wrestles with God. By the way, just as an aside, so we can bury that belief once and for all, that the Jews deserve the Holocaust, just know that factually it's an absurd claim. Because the supposedly wicked, assimilationist, secular Jews of Germany brought this devastation upon themselves through their abrogation of God's covenant. 80% of them survived the Holocaust. They knew who Hitler was. They got out. It was the Hasidim with Pius and Talis Kuttans of Europe who had no idea that Hitler had made a secret pact with Stalin to divide Poland and would invade Warsaw on the 1st of September 1939. They were the ones who went up through the chimneys of Auschwitz. Or 1.5 million children who were without sin. Professor Jonathan Weber, who's the world's foremost expert on the Auschwitz death camp site, took me a number of years ago to Galicia, where Auschwitz is, and all the surrounding villages. We went to the city of Tarnów. You can see the gates of the Jewish cemetery of the city of Tarnów in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. Till today, the residents are very upset about that it's sitting in the United States instead of there. Now, they use a replica. And we're walking out into the woods of the city of Tarnów, and it's hot, and I'm wearing sandals, and my feet are being cut up by thorns and thistles in the woods, and I say, where are we going? He said, you have to see this tree. Oh, what do I care about seeing a tree? You have to see, this is a special tree. And we walk, and I'm dripping sweat, and my feet are cut up. I say, Jonathan, for goodness sake, where is the tree? And he points at it, he says, just there. I said, why did I have to walk all the way to see that? He said there was an orphanage, 600 Jewish children, in this city, and they cleared it out in the middle of the night. And they dug a ditch, and they wanted to shoot the kids in the back of the head and have them fall into the ditch. But there was one problem. The kids wouldn't follow orders. They thought it was a game. So they were all running around. So the SS commander ordered that the children should be taken by their feet and swung around, and their skulls cracked against that tree. That tree saw the murder of 600 Jewish orphans. And they're buried right there in that ditch, where there was a little plaque, 600 Jewish children. They didn't marry out. They didn't break Shabbos. They didn't want to be more German than the Germans. So we cry out to God and we say, never again, you cannot visit that on your people. Because we are a loyal people. And the fact that all of you are here tonight proves it. Because we are the most generous nation. We are the most charitable nation. We are the most philanthropic nation. And we are the proudest nation. To have gone through what we've gone through and emerged with Jewish pride is nothing short, not of miraculous, but of sheer Jewish stubbornness. We will never lose it. And that kind of religious defiance is what we ought to see. The defiant man of faith, the rebellious man of faith. The man or woman who thinks that they can change the world for the better. The man or woman who believes that if they support an organization like Amit, they could change the course of human trajectory. They could set a life on the right path. that you can join God as junior partners in creation and change history. That is a Jewish belief. Christians don't share that belief. They're waiting to get to the next world. Their reward is up there, but ours is down here. Ana yedei le'an ma'alichem oisi. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai proclaimed before he died, one of the greatest rabbis of all time. Why are you crying, Rabbi? He said, because I don't know if I'm going to heaven or hell. Because I've never thought about it. Because I never cared. Because I never did it for a reward. I focused on this world. I raised students. I fed the hungry. I clothed the naked. I was defiant. When I saw injustice, I fought it. That's what it means to be a Jew. It's never to make peace with the world's imperfections, but it's to struggle and wrestle to always make it better. We struggle to hold on to marriages that are troubled. We struggle to hold on to youth that are troubled. We struggle to hold on to land that is contested when it's only this big, and by God, it's ours. And we don't want to take anyone else's land, but this is all we have, and it's this big. And we'll struggle to hold on to that too, and we're never going to leave it. You'll have to pry it from our cold, dead hands. And we struggle to hold on to our Jewish identities when our kids go to universities, and it's so easy to assimilate. And it's so easy to fall into the wrong company. And we'll open Chabad houses and Hillel houses, and we'll struggle even there to hold on to their identity, because we have never lost it. So when you're struggling in this bad economy, and you're struggling to pay your bills, stop punishing yourself. Embrace the struggle. Take pride in the fact that you continue to fight. If you're wrestling with problems with your children, stop punishing yourself. Speak to them from the heart. Have real conversations. Impact them with your truth. If you're struggling with tragedies, then you have the right to feel defeated at times and victorious at times, and to be endlessly thrown between those two extremes so long as you continue to struggle. You know, one of the times that I came back to Miami, I came down here to bury my aunt. My Uncle Alex's wife. She died at a very young age. We lose people to terrible disease. And she was a woman of great vitality. And she was a woman of great heart. She was involved in many Jewish philanthropies, and she was involved in many Jewish causes. And sometimes we lose the most special and precious among us, but we continue to fight. And we continue to believe, and we continue to have children, knowing that they'll continue this Jewish tradition of struggling to make the world a better, brighter place. That's why Israel should be supported by the nations of the world, because there is no more inspirational country in the world. No country has struggled more to simply establish a thriving democracy, to hold on to human rights, when sometimes the rights you're granting people are going to be used to blow you up, and still they do it. What an incredible nation. This is why the nations of the world should take a vested interest in Israel's survival. This is why young Jews should feel attached to Israel. This is why Birthright has made such an incredible impact on Jewish youth. They can't believe what the Jews have built in the desert. Christopher Hitchens was the most famous atheist in the world. He died 4 weeks ago. He discovered he was Jewish at the age of 38. His mother was a child of survivors. She never told him. I debated him 4 times. We became friends. We had ugly debates. Taron was at one of them. Ugly debates. You can watch them on YouTube. 1.1 million people watched our 92nd Street Y debate that night.
Yes, also.
But I wrote a eulogy for him. And he told me, and he wrote in his autobiography, Hitch 22, that his mother said to him before she committed suicide, that she wanted, this is a woman who had no Jewishness, other than the fact that she knew she was, and she didn't even tell her son, that her dream was to move to Israel where the Jews were making the desert bloom. That it was so inspirational to her as a British woman that you could make the desert bloom. And this stayed with him, this guy that fought God his whole life, the world's most famous atheist. That one bit of Jewishness stayed with him, that his mother's dream was to make the desert bloom, finally. A number of years ago, a very dear friend of mine got married. I did the wedding. And the next day he calls me devastated. And he said to me, Shmuley, I discovered that love is a fraud. I've always wanted to be married, it's a fraud. I said, you got married last night. And you've already discovered that love is a fraud? And he said to me, well, you know, I went to buy a camera to take pictures of the Shevra brothers. And the woman who sold me the camera in this shopping mall was very attractive. And I noticed how attractive she was. I said, okay. He said, I noticed how attractive she was. I said, where's the punchline? He said, Shmuley, I'm married and I'm still attracted to other women. Love is a fraud. You know, it would have been easy to dismiss what he said, but he made me think. I said, I got to think about this. I said, let's wait till after you Shevra brothers. Just try not to hang around. Spend a lot of time with men this week.
Avoid camera shops.
When Shevra brothers were over, I said, I want to see you. You met for coffee. I bent over the table. I looked him deep in the eyes and I said to him, some men marry their wives under the chuppah only once. And they never choose them again. And the marriage grows stable, boring and predictable. And it's never really challenged, but it never really lives. Then there are those men who are forced to choose their wives every single day. They go to work and they see attractive women who are pleasant and funny, and they exchange banter at the water cooler. But they walk right past those women when it's 5 o'clock. And on the train, on the way home, they see pretty women and attractive women. They get off the train and they continue the walk home. And on the last street before their apartment, they pass this blonde woman, this brunette woman. They're all friendly, nice, and attractive. But he keeps on walking because he's going to choose his wife anew today and marry her again so that the marriage is brand new and always current. And this is why God made us attracted to strangers so that we can reaffirm our commitment every single day. Before Sigmund Freud died, he famously said that the one question he could not answer was, what is it that a woman wants? And Stephen Hawking, the great scientist who I had the honor of hosting at Oxford a number of years ago, just celebrated his 70th birthday, and in an interview that made worldwide news, they said, what's the greatest mystery in the universe? And he said, women. So to conclude, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to answer this because I'm smarter than Freud and Stephen Hawking. Because I'm a man who's deeply in touch with his feminine side, I will today answer that mystery.
Because you married the nicest woman in the world.
You know, sometimes a man can bring that out in a woman, that's true. And it was hard work, how much, but I did it.
Thank God Debbie got you, right? She had nobody else.
I just want to introduce my sidekick.
Just giving Debbie a little,
Don't worry how much I'm practicing.
That's true, they'll be coming home.
So I will answer the question. Every woman wants to be not loved, because if she wanted to be loved, she'd stay with her parents. But every woman wants to be chosen. And her parents can't choose her. So she risks life with a stranger just to have the gift of being chosen. Because when you're chosen, you're special. You're unique. There's no one like you. And that's why God wants us to struggle with issues of good and evil every day so we can choose Him anew at every moment of every day. At every second we are confronted with moral choices to do the right thing or the selfish thing. As the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad Hasidism, says so beautifully in Tanya, every single time you struggle to choose righteousness, you struggle to do the right thing, you cause the glory of God to ascend to the highest heavens. It has to be constant. That's why I reject the Christian belief in one great statement of faith in Jesus. We Jews have no one great act. 613 individual mitzvahs, with tens of thousands of tributaries, and my God, it's hard to keep. And we struggle and wrestle if that's what keeps us on this path of righteousness. These are some of the ideas that we Jews can share with the rest of the world. These are some of the ideas that can inspire and uplift Jewish youth. I truly hope that you will support Amit. It goes without saying that I have not requested, nor would I accept any compensation for this evening's lecture. I need to learn more about Amit. I know about it from my sister. But I truly believe in the mission. And I hope to speak for you guys in places where my family will not interrupt me.
I'll be there, don't worry. I'll follow you wherever you go.
And as I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I did bring books with me. In fact, we will be selling some of these Kosher Jesus, but just make sure no one sees you with one. I want to close the circle by thanking my sister Ateret for everything she did for me. Thanking my mother and my family and all of you, and God bless you. Thank you.